In my previous video, I shared my favorite scrunchie pattern that I use to sew my scrunchies that I use every day. And then I found myself in the need for a storage for my scrunchies. So I decided to design this useful drawstring pouch. That explains the decal on the front of the bag that says Good Hair Day. This is something I created with my Cricut design space and use my Cricut maker to cut out. And obviously you just use a heat press or iron to apply it to a fabric. I found that applying a heat transfer vinyl to a waterproof canvas works just fine. So don't be afraid to give it a try. If you don't feel comfortable, try it on a little sample and then figure out the best temperature for your application. So this drawstring bag, it's a good size. It's 8 inches in width, 5.5 inches tall, and 3 inches deep. It's a drawstring closure, so you could just pull on the strings and you close your pouch. Inside it has 2 slip pockets. You can obviously personalize the packet, so you can change the packet into 2 or even 4 slip pockets. It holds a good amount of items, and also if you are using it just as a cute storage for your items, you can fold the drawstring panel over the top edge and just have an accent top of your storage box. This pattern is available in my Etsy store. The link to the pattern is in the description box below. From 1 week of the premiere of this video, this pattern will be available at a discount when you join my Facebook group. When you join the Facebook group, the discount code will be included in the post announcing the video release of the pouch. The link to my Facebook group is in the description box below, so if you are interested in joining my Facebook group, please just follow the link. This is a nice quick project that doesn't require any hardware. The only thing that you may need to have on hand is just some rope. I'm using a cotton macrame rope, but you can use a ribbon, or even you can create just a strap out of fabric. The full supply list for this project is included in the Etsy listing, so you can take a look and make sure you have everything to complete the project before you purchase the pattern. This pattern, it's a video instruction pattern, so there won't be a step-by-step instruction included in the pattern. This video serves as the instructions for the pattern, but the pattern will include printable pattern pieces along with a full cut list and intro notes for your project. If you are interested in seeing how I put this pouch together, just keep watching. Let's get started. To start our project, we're gonna be cutting out our pattern pieces. You're gonna refer to the printable pattern pieces that will be provided with the PDF download. So first you're gonna cut inside slip pocket. You're just gonna cut 1. If you would like to have more slip pockets inside, you can actually cut 2 and just repeat the same step of attaching the slip pocket to the lining on both lining panels, so that's up to you. I'm keeping just slip pockets on one side of the pouch, so I'm going to be cutting 1 panel out of the lining fabric. Then I'm going to be cutting my drawstring panels, and I'm going to need 2 of those, and I'm using the lining fabric. Then I have my main body of my bag, and the outer are cut out of waterproof canvas, so I'm using the full pattern length. And then, as provided instructions on the pattern piece, you're gonna fold the pattern piece on the dotted line, and that's how you're gonna cut your lining panels. Also, if you would like a stiffer back, you can cut two interfacing pieces based on the size of the pattern piece, the folded one. To finish our bag, you will also need a thread, a polyester thread. I like to use that, and some kind of rope or string. I'm using just cotton macrame cord that it's 1/4 of an inch in width. To start our project, we're gonna construct our outer of the bag. Let's place our outer panels right sides together, secure the sides, and the bottom, and take it to the machine and sew the sides and the bottom with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance and 2.5 stitch length. Leave those edges open, as this is our box corners, and we're gonna finish them in the next step. Now that you have your outer panels sewn in on the sides and on the bottom, we're gonna box our corners. So you're gonna open the cut and you're gonna align the side seam with the bottom seam. It seems to work the best for me when I just place the seam allowances on the opposite side and just nest the seam inside. So do that, align the sides, and repeat that on the other side, making sure that you are folding the bottom seam allowance in the same direction on both corners. Now that you have that prepped, take it to the machine and sew along the open edge with the 1/4 of an inch seam allowance and 2.5 stitch length. Make sure to backstitch well on each, on the beginning and on the end of the seam. Our corners are boxed. We can now turn the outer panel right side out to see if everything is looking good. I'm happy how my outer panel is looking, so now we can move on to construct our lining. You want to start with constructing the slip pocket. You're gonna open it and fold it in half. To make sure you folded it the correct way, you can always just compare it to the width of the lining, and mine is the same width as the lining, and that's how it's supposed to be, so I'm happy with that. When you have your lining folded and the bottom edge aligned, you can secure that with clips. Take it to the machine and sew along the long edge with the 3/8 of an inch seam allowance and 2.5 stitch length. Backstitch on both ends of your seam. Then you're gonna turn the project right side out and press it. After you press your pocket, on the right side of the project, you're gonna top stitch along the folded edge with the 1/8 of an inch seam allowance and 3.5 stitch length. My pocket panel is now ready to be attached to the lining. It's sewn on the bottom, and I have pressed it after I turned it right side out, and I top stitch the folded edge to give the pocket a little more strength. Now we're gonna move on to attaching our slip pocket to our lining panel. So you're gonna take one of the lining panels and place the pocket about 3/4 of an inch away from this cut. You want to make sure that you're gonna have a space for a seam to be sewn when you are boxing your box corners of the lining. So when you have your packet placed, you can attach it with pins. And when you have it secured to your lining panel, you're gonna take it to the machine and you're gonna top stitch along the bottom edge with the 1/8 of an inch seam allowance and 3.5 stitch length, and you want to baste your sides. Let's take it to the machine and attach our slip packet to our lining. When you have that done, another option is to split the packet, and it depends on what you're planning on using this pouch for. I'm planning it to use it for my hair supply. If you are planning on storing smaller items, you can split the packet in 3. My packet is attached to my lining, and I just want to show you what is the easy way to mark your packets to be splitted. And I decided to split the packet in 3. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna fold my lining panel into 3 equal parts and just give it a press. Now when you open your panel, you will have those 2 guidelines pressed in your slip packet, and you can just follow those to create your 3 slip packets. If you're doing 2, you will just fold the panel in half. Just a tip also, if you are splitting the packets, make sure you start sewing from the bottom and going to the top of the packet. You can do 1 single stitch line, or you can go up 1 and come back with the second one. That's gonna enforce your packets. My slip packet is completed. I split it in 3, and like I said, I started my seam from the bottom. I went up, and then when I do the return stitch to come back down with the second row of my stitching, I go back 3 times back and forth in the same stitch to give the top stitch a little more strength. So our slip packet is completed. If you would like to have more slip packets inside, you can repeat that on the second lining panel. But now, since I'm just gonna be doing the slip packets on one side of the lining, it's time to complete my lining. You want to place your lining panels right sides together, align the edges, and secure the sides and the bottom with clips. Also, with the lining, we want to remember to mark our opening that's gonna serve as our turning hole. So take some pins and mark a 3-inch opening in the bottom of your lining to remain unsewn. So just sew along the side edges and just those little seams in the bottom of your lining, making sure you backstitch well when the opening is, so when you turn your project right side out, you're not gonna undo the bottom seam. So let's take this to the machine and sew on the sides and bottom with the 3/8 of an inch seam allowance and 2.5 stitch length. Our lining sides and the bottom is sewn in. Now we're gonna work on boxing our corners. So we're gonna repeat what we did with the outer panel. When you have your corners clipped, take it to the machine and sew along the clipped edges with the 3/8 of an inch seam allowance and 2.5 stitch length. Make sure you're back stitching on the beginning and on the end of each seam. The box corners of my linings are completed. I can now turn the lining right side out to make sure everything looks good. I have my 3 slip pockets. I have my opening. So my lining is now completed. The next step is to work on our drawstring panels. You're gonna take your pattern pieces that are cut for the drawstrings, and the first thing we want to do, we want to mark the centers of each of them. I like to use the iron to do so. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna take the panels and fold them in half lengthwise to mark our centers. When you have that done, you're gonna open those panels and you're gonna align them, or you're gonna place them right sides together, and we're gonna clip the short edges because that's where our seam will be. So clip it, but make sure you are leaving a good space open in the middle of the sides. And now using a ruler, you can place the mark of 1 inch on the crease that you created and mark 1 inch away on each side with a pin. Repeat that on the other side. So when you have your panel prepped like this, you're gonna take it to the machine, and using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance and 2.5 stitch length, you're gonna sew only within those 2 4 sections. So we want to make sure we are sewing here, and we back stitching well on the beginning and on the end of each seam, but make sure you're leaving this space open, so just sewing those 4 sections. Now that you have your drawstring panel prepped like this, you sew those 4 sections. You're gonna press the seams because we want them to be open when we turn the panel right side out. So now you're gonna turn the panel right side out and take it to the machine and top stitch along the opening with the 1/8 of an inch seam allowance and 3.5 stitch length. You're gonna make sure that you're keeping the other side of the panel out of the way, so place it on the machine, making sure the other side is out of the way of the seam, and you're just gonna stitch along the opening to make sure that our seam allowance stay in place while we are using our back. Now that we have both our openings top stitch all around, and don't be afraid of it, it's really not as hard as it may look, we're gonna fold our panel in half. Making sure our seams align here. You can pin it in place. Repeat that on the other side. When you have your panels align. You want to make sure that the bottom edges align also. Press the top fold with an iron. When your panel is pressed, you're gonna now create two top stitching lines. One will run along the top edge, and it's gonna be 1/8 of an inch seam allowance with a 3.5 stitch length. You're gonna repeat that on both sides, and then you're gonna create a continuous top stitching. It's about 1 inch from the top. So you're gonna run a top stitch all around your panel to create our drawstring channel. You can mark this lane with a marking tool of your choice. Make sure it's erasable, so you can erase this line after you create the top stitch, or you can use a seam guide. So here is an example of a seam guide. It's a magnet, so it will stick to your bed of your machine. You stick this, align your fabric, and obviously you're not gonna stitch it together, so you're gonna place your fabric, making sure that your needle is in this position, and this will help you guide your fabric so your seam is the same distance from the top edge. My drawstring channel is ready. I top stitch it on the top and around 1 inch below my top edge, so I'm happy with that. Now it's time for us to base our drawstring panel to our outer of our pouch. You're gonna take your pouch in and have it right side out. Take your panel and make sure it's upside down, so the raw edges are on the top. You're gonna place it over the outer panel. Now you're gonna make sure that the seams are butterflied of the outer panel and align with the side seam of the drawstring panel, and you're gonna secure that with a clip. Repeat that on the other side. When you have the side seams aligned, you move on to clipping the raw edges of both the outer panel and the drawstring panel all around together. When you have those two units attached to each other, you're gonna take it to the machine and you're gonna baste this in place with the 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, and you can use a larger stitch length like 3.5. Now that our drawstring panel is based to our outer panel, we're gonna now work on attaching the lining. So you want to make sure that whatever method you use, you can put the back inside of the lining, or you can turn the back wrong side out, and making sure that the lining is right side out, and then place the lining into the back. But you always have to make sure that both panels, both parts of the back, so the outer and the lining, are right sides together. So that's the main thing. So I'm gonna put actually my back into my lining, so I just want to make sure that the bottom is folded a little bit, as the outer panel is larger than the lining. And also I want to make sure that my little slip pockets are on the back That's where I prefer them to be, but you are welcome to put them in the front of your pouch. So let's put our lining, put our outer inside of our lining. You again gonna start with aligning the side seams together. And then you're gonna clip the upper edge all around, making sure your drawstring panel stays in a down position. Now that you have your lining and outer panel clipped all around, you're gonna take it to the machine and sew along the top edge with the 3/8 of an inch seam allowance with a 2.5 stitch length. I completed sewing my tops all around. Now I'm gonna turn the project right side out. When you have your back turned right side out, we're gonna prep for our final top stitching. Because our lining is half an inch shorter, we're gonna have about 1/4 of an inch fold. So you wanna fold your outer panel half an inch inside. Do that on both sides of the back first, on the side seams, making sure the lining is nice and flat and that it's nicely, it reaches the bottom of your bag, so it's not going to be hanging in the air. And secure that with clips all around. When you have that secure and you know you think your pouch is nice and straight and there's no wonkiness going on the top, you can press that in place if you prefer it. That will give you a crisper, cleaner edge to sew all around. And when you have it pressed, take it to the machine and top stitch all around your back with the 1/8 of an inch seam allowance and 3.5 stitch length. My back is now top stitch on the top. Now what's left to do is to finish up our lining, and then we can move on to creating our drawstrings. So make sure you fold your raw edges of your lining inside the opening, align them on both sides and press. When you have your lining prepped, take it to the machine and top stitch along the opening, making sure you are catching both sides with the 1/16 of an inch seam allowance and 2.5 stitch length. So our lining is now closed and placed inside of our pouch. The last step is to insert our rope inside to make sure that we can close our pouch. So I cut 2 pieces of the rope, 2 size per the cut list, and I'm gonna thread both of them both ways. So you're gonna start on one end, go all around, and then with the other string you're gonna go from the opposite side. So let's do that. So now we have our rope threaded in both ways, and this is how it works. It will just close our pouch, will create nice shape. And a reason why I like to use the rope, because when you tie it out, you can create cute tassels on the ends. So make sure your ends are the same length on each side when the back is completely open, and create a knot around 1 inch away from the opening of the channels. When you have the knots created, we're gonna comb the ends of the rope. And now you can trim the extra strings. I like to leave around 2 inches. Make sure your other tassel is the same length. And like that, you just have a cute tassels on the end of your drawstring. The project is now completed. I created this cute Good Hair Day drawstring pouch. It has plenty of space inside to house my collection of scrunchies, and 3 slip pockets to house smaller items. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please make sure to subscribe to my channel and give the video a like. Also, if you would like to try making one of those pouches, the link to the pattern is in the description box below. Also, please consider joining my Facebook group. In the Facebook group, you will have access to some small free patterns and discount codes for my new pattern releases. Till the next time.